One of my favorite newsletters is Alain Kornhauser's. And Alan, you always talk about self-driving versus driverless. Can you give us the distinction? Because I think a lot of people still get it wrong.
Well, the fundamental difference between the two is self-driving. You have to have somebody in there who's capable of driving the vehicle in the vehicle. And so that means it can't be somebody under 16 years old or above 85 or somebody that's blind or, heaven forbid, somebody who's under the influence. So it's really just the same thing that we currently do with cars, except sometimes we can actually text and be excited about it and maybe do it without killing ourselves. So that's self-driving. Driverless means it's an elevator. It's just like the last time you used an elevator. You summoned it, maybe not with your smartphone, but it got there. It opened the door, you got in, it stayed open for a little while in case somebody else wanted to get in. It took you to where you wanted to go, you got out and forgot about it. That's driverless. Completely different mobility, different business model for the people who actually bring it. And so they're fundamentally different. Although for some people they confuse them, and it's unfortunate.
I guess from a technical perspective, driverless would be the level 5, no steering wheel and...
Yeah, if you want levels, why don't we just call it driverless, self-driving? And of course, the other piece that I continue to want to talk about is this safe driving, which is, in some sense, before all this. This is the sort of automated systems that are on all the time, that whenever you're acting stupid or something in a car, it says, wait a minute, I'm not going to let you do that. I'm not going to let you get into a collision. I'm not going to let you do that. I'm taking over, and I'm going to give you the get out of jail free card. And so that is before, in some sense, self-driving, and it's a shame that we haven't gotten those systems that actually work and in our cars just to keep us alive.
Yeah, and that's what this really is about, isn't it? Ultimately, what we're seeing behind us, that's self-driving car, because there's someone behind the steering wheel, but it's ultimately about safety, isn't it?
Well, I think it's not just ultimately, it's at the beginning about safety. If we don't begin with safety, none of this is going to happen. So if these things start crashing, the public sector will say no, and it will be no. So we really have to do safety first, and it really has to be about safety. The OEMs don't want to think that these things are unsafe, because then you won't buy them. But of course, I'm perfectly safe. It's the other guys. But yes, it has to be about safety, and that's what's so interesting about this. We can actually do it, and it's safety not the way we've done safety up to now, which has been crash mitigation. This is crash avoidance, so there is no crash.
And that technology is not just for vehicles, personal vehicles like this, but trains, trucks. I mean, it's all over the map, right?
Yes, it's for all of them. It's cars, trucks, buses, trains. Yes. Why should they collide? There's maybe every once in a while there may be a meteorite that comes out of the sky and hits you, and there's nothing you can do about it, or a tree falls on you. But essentially, except for those rare events, we're the ones that are causing the crashes, and we should be taken out of the loop in those particular times.
Well, in safety, that obviously is important, but the other aspect of this, but the whole idea of the built environment changing and how we think about how we build things changes based on how these cars, if they're self-driving versus ride-sharing driverless type thing.
Absolutely. So if it's self-driving and we still own our own cars, or we share a car, it doesn't matter whether we own it or share it, but we're in there by ourselves, it tends to mean it's more of urban sprawl. We're going to drive more, we're going to be in it more, it's going to be more vehicle miles, and in a sense, that's not necessarily good for the environment. It means more energy, it means more congestion, it means more pollution, and it's ugly. Whereas with driverless, it's like an elevator. If there's nobody else there, it takes you by yourself, but when there are other people there, you go together. And if you go together now in a vehicle, then instead of having two vehicles, you only have one, or instead of having three, you only have one. So that means energy, pollution, and so on is cut back. And it also suggests that maybe if the mobility is easy, we'll sort of have more dense environments, not real dense, but moderately dense, where that really makes sense. And then all of a sudden, we not only are happier, we save the planet.
And we get some exercise, because it's really about building them around people as opposed to cars, right?
Right, it's building around people. And so in a sense, you do some of the walking to a place where you get in. It's just like an elevator. You go to the elevator bank and people aggregate themselves, and you go from there to the floor. It doesn't take you right to your room. You then go to your room. And so it's the same sort of thing horizontally. And all of a sudden, I think we're all better off. We're skinnier, the planet's healthier, we're happier.
And we actually have some face-to-face interaction, just like here at CES.
Right, and we have some face-to-face interaction, so it makes sense.
Which actually, that leads to the whole idea. There's lots of faces here, I think 175,000, and there's lots of interesting stuff. But from your perspective, are you seeing a trend towards that self-driving or towards the driverless? Anything that jumps out at you from what you've seen on the show floor so far?
Well, from the OEMs, the car manufacturers, they very much like the self-driving, because it's going to allow them to sell a lot more vehicles, and we'll pay anything for them if we can text in them. And so it's a really nice market for them. The driverless is a completely different business case, and one wonders whether or not they're going to do it. I mean, what we see behind us with NVIDIA, they're really looking at driverless and trying to make driverless happen. But they're not an OEM. They want to sell the intelligence to make the driverless happen, and we'll see what happens.
Excellent. Well, that's always a continuing conversation then, and I really appreciate catching up with you, Alan.
Okay, great seeing you here.